Jen from Fabbulous Paper Emporium. I am back. So, took a little bit of a break. It was dreadfully hot here for the longest time. And I know for some of you, maybe in the southern states, it was, what we would experience as hot, maybe not be the same level, but the humidity was just out of control. So that's what I mean by hot. I have a album for you today, and I've started it, and I'm going to call it like a waterfall album, but it's different types of waterfalls. So because I've learned a couple of, I guess, new tips and tricks and things like that. So the first part, which is today, is going to be putting together the album cover, and if we can get to it, the hinge part, so that the album is all ready to go, and then we can go from page to page, different waterfalls. So in anticipation of, perhaps curiosity in terms of what we're going to be doing for waterfalls, I figured I'd show you what I have done so far. So I love this collection. It's no pun intended by Photoplay. We have the paper, we have some stamps in stock. So I started laying out the designer paper. Because a lot of it was going to be covered, I wanted to add colored paper behind the waterfall mechanisms. So I've done that, but I just used solid paper because I did not want to cover up a ton of this beautiful decorative paper. So going through it really quickly, I have the first 4 pages done. It is four signatures. So I'm going to double every single waterfall style. So I'm going to start with what I'm going to call a stacked waterfall. And it's stacked because of just how you put it together. So I've got this band, for lack of a better word, that comes over to cover or to keep the waterfall in place. And if I move right to the middle, this is actually one complete piece. And so that's what I mean by stacked. So you've got 4 pieces, all the same height in this case, and just slightly varying widths in the sense that they're an inch apart. And then once you score them, which is so easy, then you stack them, and then you end up with like the perfect waterfall. So lots of lovely waterfalls here. I have a little pocket on this side. So that's going to be the first one that we do. The second one, which is new to me, and I don't know that I've really seen it a lot of places, is I can't remember what my husband called it, but I was like, oh my God, that's a perfect name. And now it's basically like a reverse waterfall, in the sense that you've got your waterfall, your kind of traditional waterfall on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, you have it going in the opposite direction, in the sense that right now it's open. And if I pull my lever, then you get the waterfalls going in opposite directions. I know that this is not probably groundbreaking in the sense that I'm sure it's out there. I had seen this, oh my gosh, now her name escapes me. I believe she's from France, definitely French. And I was watching one of her tutorials where she did something like this and had to figure it out for myself. So that is that. Then I'm going to call this like the pull tab, because I've got a little tab here, and it is the mechanism for the waterfall. So that one's pretty simple, and simple maybe not the word, but pretty standard. I think we've seen that in a bunch of different places. And then the last one, I love this paper. I closed using Velcro tabs instead of magnets, because my magnets I'm finding that they're not overly strong. I have some new ones on order, so we'll see how those ones work. But to hold all of this in is going to need some strength. So Velcro for me, I figured would work the best. And they're clear, so they really are disguised with the beautiful designer paper. So this one is what I will call an around the world waterfall. And it simply is that we have pages that go all the way around and then come all the way back. Now I have to remember which way it went. So those are the 4 different styles of waterfall we're going to be doing. Depending on how long the videos go, I may be able to get 2, I'm hoping 2 done per. But first we need to get the album created, and I wanted this to be a dedicated tutorial. So this way, in future, when I'm going to make another album, I can kind of refer back to this one. So it's super simple. If I know I've done this once before, and it was on during our Craftsmas in July, we were doing an album. The last album was the cabin album, I think is what I called it. And it looked like a cabin in the woods. I've now put it away, so I can't show you. But anyways, so their lay flat method is there too, if you ever want to refer back to that one. So it is very simple. Chipboard is required. So for this one, I'm just simply using 2 pieces of 8.5 by 11. We're going to be using that in this format. So it is going to be a landscape album. Then I have 1 piece that is 2.5 by 8.5. And that I use some scraps for, or to cut from. Then to cover the album, the outside, we're going to need 2 pieces of whatever colored cardstock you want. And my 2 pieces are cut at 9.5 by 12. And then I have 1 piece to cut the spine, and this is 5.5 by 10.5. Yes, for a hot second I thought that it can't be right, but it is. Okay, so I should have had this ready. What I'm going to do first and foremost is I am going to cover my chipboard. I have recently started doing this in the sense that I completely cover it. I leave maybe a gap. I had to take my sweater off because it really isn't cool in my craft room because of the lack of AC, but it is kind of chilly downstairs. So, but I do leave myself a bit of a gap, and I have noticed, and I don't know if it's just me or if this is like a real thing, but I used to just do kind of the perimeter and then a couple of strips down the middle, but then found that sometimes, depending maybe on the cardstock that I was using, it would buckle a little bit. You could see it kind of moving. Now that disappeared once I started adding layers to it, so it does go away, but I just feel like adding more of the score tape is just, it seems to be working for me. So I'm not going to change it. If I'm going to invest time in making something, I definitely want to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. I'm just going to flip that around so I'm not moving too far away. But I'm going to get to doing this to all of my chipboard pieces, and I will be right back. Okay, so I have all my pieces done now. Let me set aside a trail of score tape that I've left. And we're going to apply it to our cardstock. So I'm going to grab my scoreboard for no other reason than it is super easy to apply the chipboard to the cardstock, when it's, you know, kind of in an area where it's not going to kind of scoot all over the place. So I'm pretty sure that this is straight and this is straight, so should work out fine for me. At least it has in the past. Okay, I've also decided to cut some spacers. I've never used spacers before, but this seems to be a new thing. So I am including it just as an FYI. If you haven't seen them used before, then bear with me. I actually realize now that I probably should have cut myself a second one, because for this piece, actually this piece, it's not even going to work for this piece, because this is only going to have a 1/2 inch border, which typically I'm not a huge fan of. I like having a little bit more, but it worked so well with the first one that I'm going to do it for this one. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the spacers for now, because it won't, well, the spacers I have are 1 and 1.5 inch. This is going to be a 1/2 inch all the way around. But again, part of the bonus about using the Score Pal and having the score mat is I've got all of my, I've got all of my lines to give me a really good idea that I am applying it where it needs to go. So here I am putting, kind of eyeballing between the 1/2 inch and 9. And then from the side, we also have our markings. So that is a 1/2 inch. There is 11.5 at the bottom. And then on the score mat, you also have the same markings. So I'm going to go ahead and peel off all of my score tape, and which is a lot. Okay, so now that all of my score tape has been removed, I am going to, you can apply, if you wanted to, you can apply some liquid adhesive. That might give you a little bit of wiggle room if you need it. But I'm just going to go, I just have my chipboard tilted slightly to this, like it's angled like this, with the bottom kind of going down, and that way I'm not just going to kind of drop it straight on there, and if it's crooked, just, you know, kind of have to deal with that. So I'm just trying to get it as even as I possibly can at the top, and then I gently lower it from top to bottom, and that seems to be working for me. So I'm sharing my method. Okay, so that piece is done. We're going to repeat that with our second piece. So again, putting the cardstock in my score mat, on my score mat, in my Score Pal, and peeling off all of the adhesive backing. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. So I'm lining it up at a 1/2 inch at the top and gently lowering it. So we have that. And then our very last piece, which is our hinge, well, the spine, sorry. I just realized my bottom is not really in frame, but that doesn't really matter. So for the spine piece, you are going to be needing a 1/2 inch at the side and 1 inch at the top. So if you're using your spacers, that is kind of what you do. And the idea is this piece goes right in there. And that way you have a 1 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, 1.5. That is the idea. So again, I gotta peel off my double-sided tape and apply. But again, using the score pal like I had to do for the front and back covers, it is equally as easy to use the lines as your guide. So I'm just going to slip that in there, press it down, remove my little spacers, which, by the way, just use some scrap chipboard. They seem to, you know, they seem to be pretty sturdy, so I'll just keep them until they fall apart. But I mean, they're spacers, so I can't imagine that they're going to fall apart anytime soon. Okay, so got all my 3 pieces covered. Well, at least adhered to the covering. And so now we are going to want to train the paper to go around. And I'm going to start by giving myself a bit of a guide. And how I'm doing that is just holding onto the chipboard firmly and just bending the paper. And so this way I can come back with my score tool with the chipboard facing down. I'm now going to rub the cardstock so that it is going to hug the width, or sorry, the depth of your chipboard, because you do want it to go on the sides as well, because when we put together our chipboard pieces to form the outside of our album, they're going to be adhered like this way. So you want your album to be flat, and in order to do that, we are needing to, you know, manipulate the cardstock to get it to really wrap around. So I'm going to do that on all 4 sides, and take your time with this process. It is really not a process that can be rushed. Rushing tends to lead to ripped paper and some not so nice words. I'm not speaking from experience at all. And if you know me, you know that is a big fat lie. So, yeah, so just take your time, go back and forth a few times. I'm just using this part of my bone folder, not the tip, because the tip, as you start using it, can get pretty sharp and shiv-like. So I would definitely avoid that. Plus, like I said, you don't want any ripped paper. So it's not like we're knee deep in the album, but we're deep enough that I would be annoyed at the product, you know, if I had to start all over again. So product wasted, you know, breaks my heart a little bit. So all right, so I'm going to do the exact same thing to the larger pieces, and I will be right back. Okay, so now that all of our pieces are wrapped, we are going to take the 2 largest, so the covers, the outside, not the hinge, sorry, not the other thing, the spine. And we're going to trim off the corners. So you generally want to leave yourself about 1/8 of an inch. Err on the side of caution. If you think, you know, if it's a little bit too close, then pull it away a little bit. And when we go to fold it, it should be totally fine. There is a tip and a trick on how to get your corners nice and crisp without showing any chipboard. If you happen to err and you're too close, we can always use, well, because it's black, well, at least I'm using black. If you need to, you can always take out a Sharpie and color your chipboard if there happens to be an oopsie and you've cut it too close to the chipboard. So that is possible. So I'm going to do this You can also, I don't happen to have my Tim Holtz ruler upstairs, but since it has some really nice grid marks, which will give you a 1/8 option, then you can always lay your ruler on top, give yourself an 1/8 inch space from the corner of the chipboard to where you're going to cut. Either draw a line, use some kind of cutting implement, and cut your cardstock. So we have 2 pieces now that have the corners all trimmed. That is to reduce the bulk, which works out really nicely. And we're going to reach for our score tape again. So I've got 1/2 inch all the way around the outside. I think I moved it a little bit too far down or up or whatever. So there's a slightly less than 1/2 inch at the top. Hopefully this will work out, but we shall see. So I'm going to apply my double-sided tape to the actual chipboard, not to the cardstock. And I like this method. It really works out well, in the sense that I get good contact. I know that my cardstock is at the very least going to cover most of this score tape. And then when we cover it with another piece of cardstock, nobody's going to know that this was maybe a little bit wider or less, not as wide as the score tape. Anyways, it will work out, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to apply my second piece to the opposite side. I like to work on the long sides first, and then I go to the short sides, and I'm going to peel one side. I am grabbing my liquid glue. I'm running a bead of glue right along the side, right along the edge of the chipboard, as I'm getting glue all over the place. I just know this is going to be a messy proposition, and that's fine. I have my paper towel if I need it, and I firmly press the chipboard down. And I've started doing this, and I do make a mess. I will say that, because I put way too much glue there, so I made a mess on my score mat. But I clean it just really quickly with a piece of paper towel and my finger here, because I've got all kinds of score tape. So my paper towel is just going to rip ultimately. I come back with my bone folder, which may or may not ooze a little bit more glue. And if it does, paper towel or baby wipe, either one. But the score mat, when I'm done all of the glue business, will get washed with baby wipe or soap and water. It dries, it cleans up beautifully. So no worries there that it's going to leave marks and things like that. So I'm not worried. I'm going to spin this around. We're going to do the other long side, doing the exact same method. Applying our glue, and I already know that that's going to kind of seep out, because that is a big old gob on the right hand side. I push that down. Oh, that's not so bad. Not as bad as the first side. So, and then I'm just going to go over that with my bone folder, and we have a bit more seepage, but you get a nice crisp, sides. It's all wrapped nicely. I've got a bead of glue there that's holding that all down, and even though we are less than an inch, we're just a 1/2 inch on either side, it is holding really nicely. It is not buckling. It's just beautiful. Okay. Now I'm going to apply my score tape on the short sides. And if you notice, I am not going all the way to the corner. I'm basically using these 2 points where we cut at an angle at the top point, that's kind of where I'm aiming to end my score tape. It doesn't really matter. I just feel like at the ends, you end up with a lot of extra if you go from side to side, from edge to edge. So just something to keep in mind. I'm going to spin that around and do the exact same thing on this side. I think I started peeling that. You know what? Accidentally peeled up some of the double-sided tape on this side when I was trying to peel the score tape. So of course the chipboard, being chipboard, was starting to kind of come up, and I definitely don't want that. So I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side, going, you know, from side to side, but not completely to the edge. Okay, grab our liquid glue. We're going to run the bead across the bottom. And peeling my score tape. We do want to make sure though that any excess that you're just taking either your thumb, your thumbnails, and poking that in. You could also use, my goodness, hot mess today. You take your bone folder and just kind of make sure that any excess coming down from either long sides is just pressed down, so it again is kind of going over the height of the chipboard, and that way it does a really nice job of covering up the corners and they don't stick out, meaning you don't have this awful little jaggedy pointed thing on the corners. But you do have lots of glue. Like, boy, oh boy. Going a little bit heavy-handed today, it would seem. So this is what your corners will look like. So it goes a little bit straight and then it miters off. So that is why we kind of put either our fingernails or the bone folder and just kind of covering up that corner. So hopefully all of that is making sense. So I'm just going to raise it and see if you can see what I mean. Oh, it's really hard close up. But you see how that extra paper has really kind of folded over. Now, of course, I've got like glue and all kinds of things. So I apologize if that wasn't really clear, but I'm hoping to be as clear as I possibly can. Okay, so take the adhesive backing off. We run a bead of glue from side to side, go up, across. I'm trying to be lighter with my glue, and then I fold that over. Oh, a little bit better. Marginally better. All right. Okay. So let's go across with the bone folder. You know, I used to never really understand why do people have like a rag that they're using. Well, I do now. Okay. So that is one of our chipboard pieces, our front or back cover. Don't know what this is going to turn out to be, but you're going to do the exact same thing with the other side. So I'm going to do this other side really quickly and I will be right back. Okay, so now that we're done with our front and back cover, we have our spine to cover, and the spine is done just a bit differently than the front and back cover. So before we do anything, I have folded kind of where my chipboard is ending. I really am burnishing a little bit more than I have on the front and back cover, because I want to cut away these squares at the four corners. And I need to have a guide And my guide is those score marks. So I'm going to do my best on the score marks that are going this way, vertically. I am going to cut on the score line. So the score line, if you see, by folding it this way, the score line is going to give a little bit of extra, right? So we want some extra left over. Let me get this cut. I'm going to cut as best as I can on the score line. Now on the horizontal score line, I am cutting away a little bit. You can always adjust this later, I have found, with, you know, just kind of chipping off the corners. So the score line here, I've cut a little bit off to the, I've cut off the score line completely. So here I wanted to go down a bit more. I realize this is not coming out very eloquently. And for the score line here, I wanted to leave myself a little bit of extra paper to make sure that our chipboard is completely wrapped. Okay, so I'll do the same thing to this side. So on this side, we're leaving some extra space. So I'm cutting on the outside of the score mark. And then when I flip it around and have to cut here, I'm cutting on the inside of the score mark. There. Hopefully that has made more sense. And I apologize. I am trying to word today and it's obviously not working. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of score tape, tear that off, and I will get to showing you. You know what? I should probably do this side first. Do all my cuts first. So to the outside on the top and then on the inside on the bottom. So outside and then inside. Okay, so no mitering on the corners. Okay, so then for the top, or the top little flap here, we're going to worry about that first. These flaps actually do not cross over and cover this at all. These are going to be what attaches our front and back cover. So I said that now because I have made that mistake before. So we are going to apply this much in the same way that we have done before. So I did a bead right along the chipboard piece, and then I'm going to apply a little bit of glue on the right and left side to give something, whoa, to give something to the something for the paper to kind of adhere, and then a line at the top. And then because my score tape really is not as wide as this panel, this little piece up here, but that's fine. That's fine. So I'm going to fold over like I did everywhere else. Grab my rag. Okay. And now using my bone folder, I'm just going to press this and adhere the sides to the chipboard. It is a bit of a messy exploration, or a messy endeavor, I should say. And if you do get a little piece that kind of pops up, we can always cut that off afterwards. That is also a very delicate, delicate proposition. Okay, so that is laying nicely there. And I've got it flat against the chipboard on the right and left sides. And if there is anything that comes up, then I'm not laying my scissors flat against the chipboard, but just rounding off the corners. And it doesn't do anything to the chipboard, so you don't have to worry about it, you know, not working out. Anyways. Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing to the bottom piece. So I'm going to apply some of my score tape I am going to peel that off and apply my glue. Again, top and bottom, or sorry, either side has a bit of an excessive amount of glue right there, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll wipe it off like we always do. Okay, and then get the sides down. Okay, right there. So doing much the same as what we were doing when we were first, you know, training the paper to do what we were wanting it to do, which was wrap around the chipboard. We just did it on the other side, that's all. Okay, so we have our chipboard nicely wrapped on either side. I'm just gonna give that a little bit more of a press. Okay, perfect. Press on that side. And then if it does stick up a bit, I'm just gonna come back around, just kind of take those little pieces off. There. Perfect. So now we have our spine with our two little flaps. And how this works, because now it's time to flip chipboard side down. Oops, I did get some glue on the outside. Damn it. That's okay. I'm going to use some beautiful paper to cover that up. So this is basically how it's going to adhere to our front and back cover. So we're going to do this to either side. So this is why we've not folded this in the way we did to our front and back covers. Otherwise you wouldn't really have anything to adhere to. So for this piece, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab just a slightly narrower piece of score tape. I'm going to do one strip on the outside edge, and then I'm going to do a strip on the inside, but I'm not pressing it right up against where I know my chipboard is, and I can see that because I've got like a bit of a score line. I'm going to give myself about, sorry, I've got to move this closer, but I don't want to be out of frame. There we go. So you can see here that I can definitely tell where the chipboard ends because of my paper. I've gone over that with my bone folder about 1,000,000 times. And so I am going to try and space this about 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch. You just don't want your cover to be attached, like in the sense that you don't want this side piece to be glued to your front cover. Otherwise it's not going to bend. It's, you know, you're going to have a completely open album or a glued shut album. So I'm doing that. So as close as I possibly can get without touching this edge. And then on the outside, I'm going to come back in with some glue, and I'm just going to go in between. I don't need any liquid glue, and judging by, you know, my heavy-handedness today, I definitely don't want to get this on my cover. So how I'm going to do this, and I like this method for myself because it allows me to make sure that I am putting this on straight, and that's always a good thing. So I'm folding in the other flap to give me a perfect edge on the left-hand side as well as the top, and I can come in with my cover. So I've got this firmly in place. I'm putting some pressure on my right hand side to make sure that I'm in just as close as I can possibly get to the spine, and then I'm laying it down. Okay, so we've got our beautiful hinge here. I guess it's not really a hinge, but it is a hinge. You know what I mean? But this is how it's going to look. So really nice. Oh, I got a little bit of glue there. Sorry about the messiness today. Jesus, Murphy. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat the exact same thing on this side. So it might be out of frame, hopefully not. I'm going to run my score tape on the outside, like so. And then I'm going to run the score tape as close to that middle part as I can get. And like so. Strip those off. Get the backing off. Okay. Get the backing off. Easier said than done. Okay. And then add our glue. So just staying in between those two bits of score tape. I've used 1/4 inch score tape for that one. Now this one is going to be a little bit tricky. No, you know what? I can fold this all the way in. It's a lay flat, so it's perfect. And because it's not wider than 12 inches, I don't have to worry about, you know, having to fold it like I have had to do sometimes. So okay, so same thing is I'm pushing, you know, applying some pressure to make sure that these two edges are right by each other. And there we go. Perfect. Okay, excellent. So that is our cover. I'm going to just grab my bone folder, make sure that I've got everything is glued down. So that is our cover. And you see how it, like, well, without the hinges or anything like that, it lays completely flat. Even when it's open, it does lay flat. So let me bring in, this is the one that I've made. It lays flat. So that is, I think with the other albums that I've made, this tends to pop up, your front or back cover tends to pop up a little bit more when you've got like a full album, which there's nothing wrong with that. So I think this is a method that I prefer to use, but you never know. You may see me switching back and forth, or there might be a new method that comes out and is, you know, even better, then, you know, then I'll be doing that. Okay, so now that we have our outside all done, we are going to complete the inside by doing our hinge and then putting on the two covers for the inside so that you don't see the chipboard anymore. So for your hinge piece, this piece is cut at 8 by 10.5. Whenever possible, in this album at least, I've used 8.5 by 11 pieces of cardstock, but there are the odd time where I had to go 12 by 12, which is also why I stayed with black, because I can get black in both the same weight. So I'm not having to worry about different weights. And just going to remove that. So we are going to do some scoring with this piece. We are going to put it along the 10.5 inch side at the top. And we are going to score as follows. So we are scoring at 1.5, at 2 1/4, 3, 3.5, 3.5, 4 1/4, 5, 5.5, 6 1/4, 7, 7.5, and 8 1/4, and the last one is 9. Okay, so we have our beautiful scoring done. And so for those of you who have done hinges, you'll know a little bit about how to fold this. So when you're looking at your piece, you've got two wider score marks, or 2 wider panels and then a narrow. 2 wide and a narrow. And the wider ones are what is going to form the actual part that sticks up where your signature sticks onto. The 1/2 inch piece in between each of those is the space in between. So just in case you're wondering, this is how we're going to be doing it. Okay, so I am going to grab a white marker. Of course, my white marker is not working. It is useless to me right now. Okay, so because I know black is going to be extremely hard to see, these X's are on the wider panels. These are the panels we're going to be gluing together. So whether you want to put your score tape on now, that's totally fine. You don't need to put score tape on both of those. You don't need to, just on one side. So pick an X and apply it, so long as one of the pair has the score tape on it, you're good to go. I think I'm going to do this now because, you know, it just, you know, will help out. It's a little bit tricky when you've got all your folds done and you've been burnishing really well, then it does become a little bit trickier to get your score tape where you want it. So we're going to try this time, and hopefully it works out in our favor. And then when we flip it over, we're going to be doing the same exact thing, only. So on the back side, we only need one side to be taped. You don't need, this would be, you know, kind of a waste. Then you have score tape on score tape. So this is all we need on the back side. So on the front side, I'm going to go back over with my silver marker, just so that we can keep things clear with my black cardstock. So I've given you X's on all of the hinge, like the parts that are going to stick up. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to apply my score tape before I actually do any of my folding. I saw somebody do this, seemed to work out for her a little bit easier than doing all of your folding and then applying your score tape. Kind of questioning it right now, to be honest, because it's not a method I normally use. In fact, I don't think I am. I just am a little bit particular about, you know, your score tape on this side needs to be applied towards the top, so where these two X's kind of meet. And I would just rather, you know, make sure that all of my folds are correct, or, you know, all in line before I start, you know, applying any score tape. Because not if I make a boo-boo, but, you know, sometimes when you score, it's not always 100% true and even. So I just want to make sure. And this is how I do my hinges now, because I just feel like otherwise you're folding it back and forth. It gets unwieldy a little bit. So fold in between. What I'm doing is basically folding in between those where the two X's are. So the X is on that side and that side. And then I'm just kind of using my fingers to get the fold on the outer sides. So, you know, that way, this is how your hinge is going to be, once we're done, we're going to have 4 of those. So this is how it's going to stand up. So I'm going to grab just between these next 2 X's and then gently kind of press down on my score mat and press towards me and then press away from me. And that way I've got all my score marks going in, burnished in the right direction, I should say. Okay, last one. This way. I am trying to make sure at the same time that everything is lined up, like especially on the top and well, the left and right, I guess. It will be the top and bottom, but the left and right. So this is what it's all going to look like in the end. And that's where your signatures go on. Okay, so before no, you know what? I'm going to do this, like I said, the same way I normally do. So I'm going to peel off the adhesive backing. If you wanted to add liquid glue, absolutely, but you're just basically folding this together. So I'm just going to pinch those together like so. And we're good for there. I'm going to peel and then pinch. Peel and then pinch. Just make sure that when you go to pinch, you don't press it down and adhere it to your score mat, because then you're going to have to peel it off and, you know, it becomes a whole thing. So pinch. Press this down a little bit. I was pinching it in the air, so you kind of got the idea. All right, and then my last one. And pinch. There we go. Come back in with my bone folder, just making sure that everything is nice and burnished. Perfect. So the last step before we go ahead and install this is applying score tape to either side of the parts that are sticking up. So everywhere that has an X is going to get score tape now. Our X's are all gone on the back. So each one of these is 3/4 of an inch. So you want to make sure that you are not putting your score tape down to the bottom. You want to keep it right to the top. And I'm just going to check and see. Yep, so that'll be fine. So I'm using here 1/2 inch. Yeah, 1/2 inch works perfectly. So it gives me 1/4 of an inch of play at the bottom. You could go as much as 5/8 if you wanted to. I do have 5/8 somewhere, but not at the ready. And as you can see in a moment, you'll see that I have applied it right to the top fold line. I'm just going to flip that over. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. Sorry, I just had to make sure that I wasn't kind of running off the rails somewhere. Okay, so both sides of each one of these, and I'm going to be completing each side of my hinges, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now all of my score tape has been applied, but we're not done yet. We need to apply something to this back in order to install it and get it adhered to our cover. So we are going to be applying, you guessed it, more score tape, and I'm going to go along this way and apply it. I'm going to give myself pretty decent coverage going all over. And again, you don't want your hinge. Your hinge is really the support system for all of your beautiful pages. So you really don't want this going anywhere. So I feel if ever there was a time to use your score tape, it's now. So I'm going to apply this like so. And then I try to get it so it's kind of like in between. So the space that you can see that has, you know, for the two parts that you've glued together, or rather used your score tape to adhere together. I'm getting those kind of right on the space, as much as I can. Don't have to. This is just one of my idiosyncrasies, I guess. The things that I like to do when I'm making albums. It's just me. Okay. All right. All of it is covered. And now we are going to bring in our cover and work on getting this puppy installed. And we just have a couple of more things to do, and then part 1 will be done. And we will have a beautiful start to a beautiful album. Just trying to get this stuff peeled. Never mind. Never mind me. Okay, so all the investment we have in this puppy so far, I'd like to put my my liquid glue on there, but it seems to have jammied on me a little bit. Okay, so we are going to go all the way around the outside. And then I'm just going to do a couple of zigzags down the middle. This way, if I happen to have a gross mistake and apply it really in the wrong space, then I'll be able to correct that pronto. So these hinges, you were aiming to get this in between here. So right applied right on there. And we're trying to do our best to get it in the middle. So I'm using my score mat to help me figure out where the middle is. So that is going to be a 1/2 inch. So that's roughly a 1/2 inch. And that's roughly a 1/2 inch. So I am good with where it's at. I was hovering for a very long time, but you know, you're just trying to, it is, you know, what we're creating here is handmade, and handmade is not always 100% perfect. So that was probably one of the best lessons I learned when I started creating stuff, is that I absolutely always do my best to get it, you know, perfect. But 100% perfect is probably going to be machine made, and, you know, it's not going to be made with love. There. Okay, hinge is in. Yay! So the only other thing, there's 2 things that we're going to be doing, is I've got 2 pieces to cover this chipboard. But before we go there, we need to make sure that this folds. And so we are going to take it easy. I'm going to choose one side and I'm going to start bending inwards. Of course, I'm doing it with my dominant hand. And then let me do this side first. I should have done the left side first. So I see where it's going to be bending, and I'm just going to take my bone folder, help the paper along, encourage it, talk nicely to it. Say, you don't want to break on me, not today, not today. And, you know, we can go the rest of the way. Okay, I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side. Since I cannot do this with my left hand to save my life. I have tried. All right, and then, so now we have 2 covers that will fold over nicely. And as you start folding, as you start adding, it will fold in and out very nicely. So these are the last 2 pieces that I have cut for the completion of our album cover. And so these 2 pieces are cut 10 3/4 by 8 1/4. And these will go right like so. So I'm trying to keep about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around the outside, but this will cover all your chipboard, all the tabs and things that we have going on. So this too will ultimately get covered. So if you already have a plan, you don't want to add too much weight or cardstock, then you can always leave this open. In the sense that if there's colored cardstock that you're wanting to use instead, then you can absolutely cut that out of the colored cardstock instead of just black. And, or if you want to put decorative paper, you can always do that as well. And I've got more glue kind of seeping. So just making sure that that gets pressed and that my final page is all in place, making sure that my writing is face down so nobody sees it. Just the chipboard. Ooh, almost went off the rails there. Okie dokie. And being that it's black on black, it's a bit forgiving. So even if you're not 100% true and straight, you're not going to have to worry about it. It's going to be covered. There's going to be so many other beautiful things for people to look at in your beautiful album that, you know, checking to see that you have exactly 1/8 of an inch border all the way around the outside is not going to be one of them. So there we have it. We have the outside of what will be our Waterfall album. But if you wanted to stop here, I know we haven't done the signatures yet. That will be in part 2, as well as some of the waterfalls. We'll get into making the waterfalls in part 2 as well. So do keep an eye out. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider hitting the subscribe button. That goes a long way to, you know, helping me reach my goals. And if you would be so kind as to hit the bell too, then you won't miss any of our future videos. And that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Hopefully you've enjoyed our time together. I know I certainly have, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye.